Coach Riley's been pretty consistent this spring so far. We're 8 practices in, halfway through spring camp, and he's really been consistent with his answers regarding the 2025 roster. So halfway through, consistency, that's been the key.
You are Locked On USC, your daily podcast on the USC Trojans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Fight on, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Holkin, and thank you for making Locked On USC part of the Locked On Network, your first listen every day. Whether you are watching this show on YouTube, you know the routine. Pick a platform, download the podcast every day. Every day it's going to be free, and every time you do it, I'm going to appreciate your support. We're 8 practices down. Yeah, there's 7 more to go. Coach Riley was asked about the spring transfer window after practice Thursday afternoon and what USC is going to be looking for. Earlier this week, he mentioned, linebacker, if the right guy is available. He didn't mention any other position group, and he stayed consistent. He hasn't really deviated from. He's content with what he has right now. So a couple days later, after he gave that answer, we're thinking maybe we'll look for a linebacker. Here's the latest Cliff Notes version of what's going down. Coach Riley basically said he's done being so reliant on the transfer portal. Not his words. Again, this is the Cliff Notes version. He went on to talk about how each year is different. But this year, he thinks the roster doesn't have the same needs as it has in the past. And I think everybody can agree with that. This is probably his best, deepest roster. So in other words, he said he's comfortable with who's already on the roster. Or, if they're not here now, they're going to be arriving soon in June. So here's his quote that where he breaks everything down after practice. There's less needs on this football team than maybe in some of the years past when we were at this point. That doesn't mean there won't be some good freaks out there. There probably will be. And we'll sort through those. But the majority of our football team is already here or already signed and will be here in June. End quote. Now, it's completely possible that, Coach Riley is playing possum, or he's kind of, trying to throw others off the scent. Is that possible? Sure. Maybe he doesn't want to, rock the roster's boat, so to speak. Doesn't want to tip his hand, let anybody, let a specific, position group, hey, you guys aren't getting it done. I've got my eye looking at players who are over there on other teams. You never want that lingering, you don't want that gray cloud kind of hovering over the practice field. So you got that. And then obviously, injuries, especially if it comes to a key player or players, heaven forbid that happen, that really changes the calculus. But it really sounds like Coach Riley he's ready to dance with the dates that he's lined up. Everybody's at the party, get in line. It's your turn. I mentioned on yesterday's episode of Locked On USC that Ratumana Bulabalavu, he flipped to the other side of the line of scrimmage. I said the move may or may not be permanent. This is what Coach had to say after Thursday's practice this week. It's a full-time switch right now, as he's only working on offense. He just made the switch this week. So just informing everybody of that situation. However, the coaches will continue to monitor that as time goes on. Mana has the ability to help his team on the offensive line or the defensive line. And he continued to add that putting together some good practices on defense, but he also flashed some things that made the coaches want to take a look at him on the other side. He's got some real natural ability on both, end quote. Mana's biggest natural ability is his size. He's 6'3", 310 pounds. he's over there because the interior offensive line is dealing with some bumps, some bruises. That number is increasing daily. I'm not going to scare anybody, but I got word today that somebody else is going to be limping around. We'll call him the Gimp. We'll see what happens, but even though Mana has the natural ability, the talent to play on the offensive line side of the ball, if we're being pragmatic about this, and I'm just giving you my honest opinion, I think this has more to do with just having big bodies over there to work with right now on the offensive side of the ball. Look, you already know that Killian O'Connor is one guy. Coach Riley says, well, we might get him back for the last week. Well, that would be starting next week and the week after. Maybe it's possible. He was asked about offensive lineman Makai Sena, who was also sidelined. Riley said they hope to have him back for the final week of spring or so. We'll see. I'd be surprised if that happens. He was the guy I was alluding to on yesterday's episode of Locked on USC, who may be out for a while. I think he'll be out for a while. Here's the thing, though. USC doesn't have to get ready for a game right now. So despite these injuries, and again, they're not serious injuries. The fact that they're kind of piling up, you work with what you have, and you don't want to panic and say, well, we got to get to the transfer portal. The fact that they're not looking at the portal is because they don't think none of these injuries are going to affect them, adversely affect them much longer. At least by the time they get the summer PRPs and fall camp, all this should be behind them. With that being said, USC did get a couple of players back who have been, I guess they've been nursing along, kind of slow playing them, making sure they're ready, because you don't want to rush anything back, especially when you're dealing with knees and hamstrings. So Keyshawn Silver, defensive tackle, he was back. He looks like he has been allowed to, participate in some contact activity now. And Makai Lemon as well. His hamstring seems to be in good working order. So he's back to doing some of the drills that maybe he was holding himself out from. And look, as you know, I want to pass this note along. Big and fast is always going to be a winning combination in football. If you're big and you're fast and you're strong, those are three things that good coaches can mold into. They can take a good player and make that player great because they have those intangibles. Well, Elijah Newby, he might have those intangibles. He made the switch from linebacker to defensive edge, defensive end, rush edge this offseason. He's up to 235 pounds. Okay. Remember, in high school, he played wide receiver. He also played on the defensive side of the ball. But he let everybody know after practice that even though he's bigger, up to 235 pounds, he's still hitting 21 miles per hour plus when they're testing. You like that, especially if he's going to be like a pass rush specialist. He said, look, I can use my speed to my advantage. I don't care how good of an offensive tackle you are. You better have a quick first step. Otherwise, he's going to get around you. If Elijah can start refining the technique where it's not just about getting around the outside and getting to the quarterback, but being able to develop some different types of moves where all of a sudden you get the offensive lineman off balance, now you can use that speed and take advantage of the situation. So we'll see how he continues to develop. But the fact that he is, up to 235 pounds and he's still running like a deer, like I said, big, fast, strong, the winning combination. And that's what Coach Haney and Coach Nua get to work with right now this spring. So, I really wish we had a spring game so I could see what that looks like. Unfortunately, we're not going to have a spring game. And I'm going to talk about that in the next segment and how the lack of the fans in the stands watching might actually be a benefit for USC's QB1, Jayden Maiava. Talk about that next. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Texas was waiting and they were wondering and worrying if you're going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now, Taxes is matching you with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives you your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. All so you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates with only with the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Last spring, Jayden Maiava, he knew that he had to literally be Superman on steroids if he was going to unseat Miller Moss from that QB1 role. I mean, even if he had the better spring game than Miller, and it was, you know, it wasn't going to happen, right? He could have been equal or better than Miller Moss last year in the spring game, and it was still going to be his team, Miller's team. No way around that. Jayden doesn't have that obstacle this season, right? Miller is now off in Louisville doing his thing. Jayden has been able to use the offseason to kind of, work on his own, build his own confidence up, not worry about, looking over his shoulder at the incumbent having to beat him out. But you've got Sam Heward, you got Husan Longstreet. Those guys would love the opportunity to show what they can do on the Coliseum grass in front of 10,000, 12,000 fans, whatever the number is. That ain't happening. Coach Riley explained why, and I get it. He thinks that it would be more beneficial to the team where they can focus on getting each player and those position groups better without going through the simulation of a spring game where they're not going to show anything anyways, and it's just kind of a dress rehearsal for the fans to watch. So it makes sense. Nevertheless, you still want it because you want to keep the fans involved, right? So Husan and Sam, they would get more benefit out of the opportunity than Maiava would. Gage Roy, Jack Stupin, the backups, they want to, get a couple of opportunities to throw the ball in front of other guys, see, with their families watching. It'll probably be the only chance they get during the season. But Jayden is QB1 in 2025. So everybody else, the other quarterbacks get the benefit. Jayden, not so much. And I'll explain why here. If Jayden knows he's going to be the prohibitive favorite to be the starter, you have the elite guy Husan, he's probably further along than most freshmen would be at this stage. Don't forget, you got Sam, was once a 5-star uber elite talent. If Husan and Sam looked better than Jayden during the spring game, all of a sudden now, those things that might, that Jayden might have been questioning last year starts to surface again. It could have it could have an effect on his confidence that's really growing right now. A spring game could give a freshman like Longstreet, the chance to kind of shine, shift momentum, so to speak. Whereas, you keep those practices private, the focus now gets to stay on Maiava. I'm not trying to say that Jayden's, any type of some shrinking violet. He's going to wither up if he has a poor spring camp or poor spring game. But at least the competition talk, the talk of the competition and, who should be quarterback, that kind of gets pushed out of the public realm. So without a spring game, for example, let's say Jayden has one of those really bad performances, 3 interception type of game performances like he had in the Las Vegas Bowl. Yeah, he came back and led the team to a victory, but I'm just trying to use a specific example. Interceptions. Let's say he throws one during a spring game. Now all of a sudden the fans are like, did you see that interception he threw? He hasn't fixed anything. He hasn't developed. Or how come he's not taking off and running when the opportunity presents itself? It's that type of public criticism. Valid or not, it could affect his confidence if that starts to show up in the spring. Spring practices without a game, it just allows Maiava to work on those specific type of issues. Work on his footwork. If he has happy feet, his decision making. Without having a spring game, that type of environment, Coach Riley can simulate game type situations and look for those specific things. Throw the pass rush at him with only 2 blockers, see how he reacts. Obviously, that would never happen in a game, but it speeds up the process, the decision-making process. So again, without that, you're not having the 2 other guys. And I think Huson and Sam are really the guys who would be on the field if for whatever reason Jayden can't go, whether it's injury or he's just not performing. You don't want to give those guys an opportunity to show their skill set and have Jayden start overthinking. So when you skip a spring game, you're emphasizing the team's internal growth, right? Jayden can continue to build on that relationship building that he's doing with the team. Now, with that said, with the spring game, it gives Jayden the chance to kind of showcase all the improvement he's made. He can display those leadership skills that that he's been talking about, that Coach Riley's been talking about. But again, I think the benefit of not having a spring game helps him more than having it, just because of we know how the fans can be. They become very critical. Those untrained eyes know what they're looking at, especially when they're sitting on the couch or watching it on TV. All right, we got one more segment to go. I'm going to talk about my Friday rant. But again, so far, spring camp, Coach Riley, it's been all about consistency with his answers, with the team. If we're talking about Jacoby Lane, he said that's the key to him taking the next step. I wrote a really cool article, my yay or nay article over on wearesc.com, and it's almost like Coach Riley knew that these questions were coming because I addressed certain things in my article, and they ended up being the topic of the media scrum this on Thursday afternoon. So go check that out. Don't forget we're doing that $1 subscription special. Say that 3 times fast. Where you get a week subscription for $1. And there's a lot of content over there right now. So you want to check that out. And don't forget, if you haven't become a subscriber to Locked On USC yet, which is a free show, and you're watching on YouTube, click that red subscribe button, smash that thumbs up. Both of those are going to continue to help the show grow. It just brings more eyes to the show, and that's what we want here. All right, here comes the Friday rant. Why are analytics so important to sports fans? I've never look, I understand analytics. I get they have a place, but I think some put way too much emphasis on analytics, the numbers. First of all, when you start using that as your Bible, how you're going to build a roster or plays you're going to call, whatever, you're literally ripping the heart, the soul out of the game. I mean, I love watching the play just happen, watching everything organically grow. Whatever's happened, happened. I'm into whatever. If it's fate, it's fate. But it's almost like when you use analytics, you're trying to predict and force something to happen. If I do this, this will happen. Like for every action, there's a reaction. I'm not sure I'm into that. What analytics does is it just reduces the game to numbers. Expected points, win probabilities, player efficiency ratings. You know what those are? Those three things alone, those are a sports agent's best friend during contract negotiations. They go, hey, look at these numbers. Let me show you these stats that we've put together. I think this whole analytics phenomenon started back with, well, it's definitely started in baseball as far as I'm concerned, with Billy Beane, that whole Moneyball thing. Look, if you need analytics to make an argument, you're probably overthinking the situation. I was part of a discussion over there on the WeAreSC.com board, and I said, you know what? I'm going to make that my Friday Rant topic. So that's why I'm here, but doing this right now. We were talking about, how PFF uses, analytics to kind of gauge a player's performance. It's just some random. It's not random, but it's an algorithm with some dude, taking subjective data points, throwing it into a computer, and it spits out a score. I'm not. Yeah, no. I mean, look. In baseball, if you can hit 300 for average or better, you're a good hitter. I don't need any type of analytics to say you're not. But look, some sports nuts out there, they want to know if Shohei Ohtani hits more home runs with 2 strikes and 1 man on base instead of with 2 strikes and the base is empty. Watch the game. Who cares? Like I said, Pro Football Focus, friend of the show. We have them on all the time. That platform is an analytic nerd's dream. You just have some dude, they're putting in subjective data points, they plug it into an algorithm, and that's supposed to determine if a player is good or not. Yeah, I just can't get there. I can't cross that bridge. For me, there's just way too much nuance, too much unaccounted context that all of a sudden now that algorithm, it can't decipher. Like in basketball, the players have fallen in love with the 3-point shot. I don't think anybody would argue that. The NBA, as far as I'm concerned, the product sucks now. But when you're using analytics, the math says that 3-pointers are more than 2 points. They have a higher expected value over time. Well, yeah, you make 2 threes, you got 6 points. You make two 2-pointers, you got 4 points. So yeah, the obvious. But trust me on this. I don't need it. You don't need Mr. Escalante, playing finger tricks in front of you to let you know that if you shoot 43 pointers and you miss 30, that's probably not the way to do things. Even though analytics say, hey, you get more points if you make a 3. You got to make them. And then don't even get me started on the whole, football EPA, the expected points added. Yeah, I don't get it. I don't understand it. I don't want to understand it. Because those types of things, it's looking at 4th down calls. If they don't execute, it's a dumb play call. But again, it can't account for context. Because at that moment, it might say, this is the time to go for 4th and 1. And why you don't really know why they're doing it. So you get that whole disconnect. So again, I just wanted to get that off my chest. I am not an analytics dude. It's got a small role, but if you're using that to determine who should be starting and who should be a backup, I'm probably not going to use it. I'm going to go look at the film. I'm going to go watch practice. I'm going to see if they're developing, if they're improving in certain areas. That's what I'm looking for. I'm not focused on the numbers. All right. Again, thank you for making Locked On USC your first listen every day. Make your second listen of the day. You got to go check out the Locked On NFL Network, the Locked On NFL Draft with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. As your favorite college players get ready for the next level, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. I will be back with another 5 episodes next week. If something big happens or drops over the weekend, I'll pop in and give you another episode. There's going to be more recruits on campus. There are a lot on campus again today. There'll be more commitments coming. We'll see if it's slowing down or not. But USC's recruiting momentum, it's rolling right now. You don't need any analytics to tell you they have the #1 class in the country. They have the #1 class because they have the most commitments, but they don't have the most elite commits. What do they have? What do they have? The best players from California, the players they want. So again, you're looking at stars. USC's looking at a culture. That's why when analytics meet real life, it's like oil and water mixing. And sports, it's about heart, desire. It's not always about the numbers. So, until the next episode, everyone, you know what to do.